The battle begins. The stars shone brightly in the dark void of space, their light reflecting off the massive floating arena that hovered above the planets. This was the grand tournament of the cosmos, a competition where the strongest heroes of the galaxy gathered to prove who was the mightiest. The greatest warriors from every corner of the Milky Way would fight in this arena, and only one would emerge victorious, earning the title of Champion of the Stars. The crowd cheered loudly, their voices blending together in a deafening roar. Spectators from different planets, each with unique appearances, filled the stands, their eyes glued to the arena. They had traveled from across the galaxy to witness the spectacle of strength and skill, where the best would compete for the highest honor. In the center of the arena, the champions stood ready, each one showcasing their incredible powers. The first to step forward was Krax, a towering warrior from the planet Zornuk. His muscles rippled beneath his alien armor, and his glowing blue eyes pierced the crowd. Krax had won this tournament 3 times in a row, and everyone expected him to win again. Beside him was the fierce Alara, a master of both magic and physical combat. She had once single-handedly defeated an army of invaders, and her reputation had spread far across the galaxy. Then there was Raxian, a swift alien with the ability to control time for short periods. His reputation was one of precision and skill, making him a dangerous opponent to anyone who faced him. And among them stood Ethan, the only human in the tournament. He was not tall like Krax, nor did he possess the magical abilities of Alara or the time-manipulating powers of Raxian. He was just a young man from Earth, with only basic combat training. His presence in the arena was a shock to everyone. How could a human, a species known for their lack of special powers, compete with the galaxy's greatest heroes? Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he stood before the other warriors. He had trained for months, pushing himself to his physical limits. His muscles ached, his hands were sweaty, and his mind raced with doubt. But he had a reason for being here. He wanted to prove something, not just to the champions in front of him, but to himself. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the greatest tournament the galaxy has ever seen. Prepare for a battle like no other. The fight will begin soon." Ethan could feel the weight of the eyes upon him. The crowd's whispers were mixed with laughter and curiosity. Some were amazed that a human was even allowed to compete. Others thought he would be crushed in the first round. No one believed he stood a chance. But Ethan wasn't bothered by the looks. He had been through worse. Back on Earth, he had fought for everything he had. His family, his survival, his future. Now he was here in the most dangerous arena in the universe, ready to prove that no matter where he came from, he could stand with the best. The first match was about to begin. Ethan's opponent was a large, muscular being from the planet HFY, a creature whose skin was like thick, armored plates. It was said that the HFYians could withstand most forms of attack, making them almost invincible. Ethan had no illusions. He was about to face a monster. The horn sounded, and the match began. Ethan immediately took a defensive stance, his legs bent slightly, his eyes watching his opponent's every movement. The HFYian, roaring, charged at him with incredible speed, its massive fists swinging toward him. Ethan barely had time to react, but he managed to dodge just in time, rolling to the side as the HFYian's fist slammed into the ground, creating a shockwave that sent dust flying into the air. The crowd gasped. Ethan had avoided the attack, something that no one had expected from the human. Ethan didn't waste time. He quickly recovered his stance and aimed a quick punch at the HFYian side, hoping to hit a weak spot in its armor. The HFYian grunted, barely feeling the impact, and swung a massive fist at Ethan once more. This time, Ethan didn't have time to dodge. The punch landed hard, sending him flying through the air and crashing against the arena's force field. Pain shot through his body, but Ethan gritted his teeth. He couldn't afford to give up now. The HFYian advanced, but Ethan wasn't done yet. He stood up shakily, his vision blurred for a moment, But his resolve was stronger than ever. He had fought harder than this on Earth, and he wasn't going to back down now. The battle begins. The stars shone brightly in the dark void of space, their light reflecting off the massive floating arena that hovered above the planets. This was the grand tournament of the cosmos, a competition where the strongest heroes of the galaxy gathered to prove who was the mightiest. The greatest warriors from every corner of the Milky Way would fight in this arena, and only one would emerge victorious, earning the title of Champion of the Stars. The crowd cheered loudly, their voices blending together in a deafening roar. Spectators from different planets, each with unique appearances, filled the stands, their eyes glued to the arena. They had traveled from across the galaxy to witness the spectacle of strength and skill, where the best would compete for the highest honor. In the center of the arena, the champions stood ready, each one showcasing their incredible powers. The first to step forward was Krax, a towering warrior from the planet Zornuk. His muscles rippled beneath his alien armor, and his glowing blue eyes pierced the crowd. Krax had won this tournament 3 times in a row, and everyone expected him to win again. Beside him was the fierce Alara, a master of both magic and physical combat. She had once single-handedly defeated an army of invaders, and her reputation had spread far across the galaxy. Then there was Raxian, a swift alien with the ability to control time for short periods. His reputation was one of precision and skill, making him a dangerous opponent to anyone who faced him. And among them stood Ethan, the only human in the tournament. He was not tall like Krax, nor did he possess the magical abilities of Alara or the time-manipulating powers of Raxian. He was just a young man from Earth, with only basic combat training. His presence in the arena was a shock to everyone. How could a human, a species known for their lack of special powers, compete with the galaxy's greatest heroes? Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he stood before the other warriors. He had trained for months, pushing himself to his physical limits. His muscles ached, his hands were sweaty, and his mind raced with doubt. But he had a reason for being here. He wanted to prove something, not just to the champions in front of him, but to himself. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the greatest tournament the galaxy has ever seen. Prepare for a battle like no other. The fight will begin soon." Ethan could feel the weight of the eyes upon him. The crowd's whispers were mixed with laughter and curiosity. Some were amazed that a human was even allowed to compete. Others thought he would be crushed in the first round. No one believed he stood a chance. But Ethan wasn't bothered by the looks. He had been through worse. Back on Earth, he had fought for everything he had. His family, his survival, his future. Now he was here in the most dangerous arena in the universe, ready to prove that no matter where he came from, he could stand with the best. The first match was about to begin. Ethan's opponent was a large, muscular being from the planet HFY, a creature whose skin was like thick, armored plates. It was said that the HFYians could withstand most forms of attack, making them almost invincible. Ethan had no illusions. He was about to face a monster. The horn sounded, and the match began. Ethan immediately took a defensive stance, his legs bent slightly, his eyes watching his opponent's every movement. The HFYian, roaring, charged at him with incredible speed, its massive fists swinging toward him. Ethan barely had time to react, but he managed to dodge just in time, rolling to the side as the HFYian's fist slammed into the ground, creating a shockwave that sent dust flying into the air. The crowd gasped. Ethan had avoided the attack, something that no one had expected from the human. Ethan didn't waste time. He quickly recovered his stance and aimed a quick punch at the HFYian side, hoping to hit a weak spot in its armor. The HFYian grunted, barely feeling the impact, and swung a massive fist at Ethan once more. This time, Ethan didn't have time to dodge. The punch landed hard, sending him flying through the air and crashing against the arena's force field. Pain shot through his body, but Ethan gritted his teeth. He couldn't afford to give up now. The ex-Ivorian advanced, but Ethan wasn't done yet. He stood up shakily, his vision blurred for a moment, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He had fought harder than this on Earth, and he wasn't going to back down now. As the ex-Ivorian closed in again, Ethan saw his chance. The alien warrior was powerful, but it was slow. Its size made it clumsy, and its attacks predictable. Ethan used his agility to his advantage, dodging and weaving through the ex-Ivorian's punches. The crowd was on the edge of their seats now. They had been expecting Ethan to fall after the first few hits, but instead he was still standing. Despite the odds, despite the pain, he was still fighting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan saw an opening. As the ex-Ivorian swung one of its fists toward him, Ethan ducked under the punch and slid beneath its massive legs. He then used all his strength to push against the creature's back, sending it stumbling forward. The ex-Ivorian, off balance, fell forward, hitting the ground with a loud crash. The crowd erupted in shock and applause. Ethan had done the impossible. He had knocked the mighty ex-Ivorian down. For the first time, Ethan felt a rush of triumph, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of uncertainty. The other champions were watching him now, their eyes filled with something he couldn't quite read. Was it fear, respect, or something else? But he couldn't focus on that now. The battle wasn't over, and the real challenge was just beginning. As Ethan prepared for the next round, he knew that he had just proven something to everyone, including himself. He had shown that even without powers, a human could stand tall in the face of the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known. The real test, however, was yet to come. The unexpected strike. The battle had taken an unexpected turn. The roar of the crowd still echoed through the arena as Ethan, the human, stood tall amidst the wreckage of his first battle. He had just managed to defeat the ex-Ivorian, a creature many thought unbeatable. His heart raced as adrenaline pumped through his veins, but there was no time to rest. The next match was already underway. As the announcer's voice boomed through the arena, the crowd shifted in anticipation. No one had expected Ethan to make it past the first round, let alone win. But now, the whispers of disbelief had started. Could this human actually have what it takes to stand against the galaxy's mightiest heroes? The arena was silent for a moment, and then the next challenger stepped forward. This time, it was Raxian, a warrior whose speed and control over time had made him a legend. He had defeated entire fleets of enemies single-handedly, using his ability to slow time to strike with precision before his opponents even knew what hit them. His glowing red eyes scanned the arena, and the moment they landed on Ethan, a smirk crossed his face. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was no longer an underdog fight. This was against someone who was capable of controlling time itself. Raxian's voice, smooth and cold, echoed through the arena. "You've done well to make it this far, human, but this is where your journey ends." The crowd fell silent, waiting for the next move. Ethan, however, didn't flinch. He could feel the weight of the challenge pressing down on him, but he was not about to back down. The memory of his victory over the ex-Ivorian flashed in his mind. He had proven something to himself, and now he had to prove it again. The fight began. Raxian moved first. Ethan barely had time to react before the warrior's body blurred, moving faster than any human eye could track. Time seemed to slow as Raxian's fist came toward him, a mere blur in the air. Ethan barely ducked in time, the air above his head rippling with the force of the blow. His instincts kicked in, and he immediately rolled to the side, trying to gain some distance between them. But Raxian wasn't done. He appeared next to Ethan in the blink of an eye, his fist striking the air where Ethan had just been. The human could feel the wind from the punch rush past him, barely missing. He barely had time to breathe before Raxian was upon him again, moving faster than before. The crowd gasped as they watched the human dodge attack after attack. How was he doing this? Ethan could feel Raxian's every movement, each shift in the warrior's stance, It was like fighting against the flow of time itself, and it made his heart race with every step. Raxian's smirk widened. "Impressive," he said, his voice filled with both amusement and challenge. But it's not enough. Ethan knew that Raxian was toying with him. The warrior was letting him get a few lucky dodges in, but at any moment, Raxian could end the fight with a single, precise strike. He had to think quickly. His body was beginning to feel the strain, and he knew that if he kept dodging, he wouldn't last much longer. Then, in an instant, something clicked in Ethan's mind. A thought, an idea, suddenly made everything clear. Raxian's ability to control time gave him an advantage, yes, but that wasn't invincible. Time itself could be fooled, and Ethan had a plan to do just that. With a burst of speed, Ethan closed the distance between them. Raxian's eyes narrowed in confusion as the human approached him, almost as if he had lost control of time. It was as if Ethan was moving faster than the warrior had anticipated. The human feinted left, making Raxian swing his fist to intercept. But Ethan, with the speed of desperation, ducked and rolled to the right. It wasn't just a dodge. It was a move to disorient his opponent. The ground beneath Ethan's feet trembled as he pushed off with all his strength, springing toward Raxian's exposed side. The crowd watched in shock as Ethan's fist collided with Raxian's ribs, striking with a force that sent the time-bender stumbling back. Raxian's surprise was evident, as he hadn't expected the human to strike at such an angle, especially after barely dodging his attacks. Ethan took a step back, breathless. His heart raced as he realized what he had just done. It wasn't a knockout, but it was a hit. A clean hit on a warrior who was known for his almost godlike control over time. He had disrupted the flow of Raxian's attacks, just for a moment. And that was all he needed. Raxian's expression changed. His smirk faded, replaced by a look of disbelief. He had underestimated this human. Ethan had made him flinch, and that was something no one had ever done before. The arena was silent. The crowd couldn't believe their eyes. For a brief moment, the mighty Raxian, the one who had defeated countless opponents with his power over time, was thrown off balance by a simple human. This was not just a fight. This was history unfolding before their very eyes. Raxian recovered quickly, but the damage had been done. Ethan had shown him that he wasn't just a human. He was a force to be reckoned with. The tension in the arena grew as the two warriors circled each other. Both were now fully aware that this battle was no longer about power alone. It was about willpower, strategy, and the determination to win. The next move was anyone's guess. But one thing was certain: Ethan was no longer the underdog. The galaxy's mightiest heroes were watching, and they knew that this human had the heart of a champion. The impossible loss. The crowd's murmurs filled the air like an electric current, buzzing with a mix of disbelief and excitement. Ethan, the human who had fought his way through the tournament against impossible odds, was about to face his greatest challenge yet. He had earned the respect of the galaxy's finest warriors, but the next match would test him in ways he couldn't have imagined. The next opponent to step into the arena was a massive creature, towering over Ethan by several feet. The creature's body was covered in thick, scaly armor, and its eyes glowed a menacing red. This was Gralfar, the blood beast, an ancient warrior whose strength was said to be beyond comprehension. Gralfar was not just a fighter. He was a living legend, and few dared to challenge him. His reputation alone was enough to strike fear into the hearts of even the most seasoned warriors. Ethan's heart raced. His earlier victories had been hard-won, but he had never faced anyone like Gralfar. He knew this would be different, but there was no turning back. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to let fear stop him now. As the match began, Ethan immediately sized up his opponent. Gralfar charged forward with a roar, his massive fists swinging like hammers. Ethan barely had time to react, but his instincts kicked in. He ducked just in time to avoid a crushing blow, the wind from the punch almost knocking him off his feet. Ethan scrambled to the side, narrowly avoiding another strike. The crowd cheered, impressed by his agility, but it was clear that he was outmatched in raw power. Gralthar's blows were devastating, each one capable of ending the fight in a single hit. But Ethan wasn't ready to give up. He couldn't afford to. Every fight he had fought up to this point had been about proving his worth. And now, more than ever, he needed to prove that he could stand with the greatest heroes the galaxy had ever known. Gralthar lunged again, and Ethan barely dodged to the side. But this time, something was different. Ethan's foot slipped on the slick surface of the arena, and before he could recover, Gralthar's massive fist collided with his side. The impact was like nothing Ethan had ever experienced. The force of the punch sent him flying through the air, and he crashed hard into the ground. Pain exploded through Ethan's body. He gasped for air, his vision blurring. He struggled to move, but the pain was too much. Gralthar wasn't done. The blood beast stood over him, his eyes burning with fury. Ethan could feel the heat of Gralthar's breath as the creature lifted its foot, preparing to deliver the final blow. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow down. Ethan knew he couldn't get up in time. His body was too battered, too weak. But his mind raced. He had one last chance. He couldn't let it end like this. With every ounce of strength he had left, Ethan reached for his blaster, hidden beneath his torn armor. His fingers trembled, but he gripped the weapon tightly. He aimed it at Gralthar's chest, hoping against hope that he could land a shot. Gralthar raised his foot, ready to crush him. In that split second, Ethan fired. The shot hit Gralthar square in the chest, and the force of the blast staggered the creature back. Gralthar roared in pain, his massive body momentarily thrown off balance. But it wasn't enough. Gralthar's enraged roar filled the arena as he shook off the shot, his scaly hide barely scratched by the blast. Ethan's vision began to fade. The pain was unbearable, and he could feel his strength draining away. Gralthar, now furious, advanced. This was it. Ethan was sure of it. But then something unexpected happened. Gralthar hesitated. His foot hovered just inches above Ethan's chest. The blood beast looked down at the human, his red eyes narrowing in something that could almost be called respect. The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one had ever seen Gralthar hesitate in a fight. He was a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless. And yet, here he was, considering the human at his feet. For a moment, it felt like the entire galaxy held its breath. Could this truly be the end of Ethan's journey? The crowd was on edge, unsure of what would happen next. Would Gralthar finish him off, or would something else unfold? Suddenly, the arena's emergency systems kicked in. The loud, blaring sound of alarms cut through the tension. Gralthar, still hovering above Ethan, froze. The floor beneath them began to glow with a soft blue light, and the force field surrounding the arena pulsed with energy. A voice echoed from the speakers. Emergency medical intervention. Ethan's condition is critical. Match is paused. Ethan barely heard the announcement. His body felt as though it were on fire, his consciousness slipping away. He could feel his pulse weakening, his limbs growing numb. He had lost more than just a fight. He had lost something far worse. The medic droids rushed to his side, but they were too late to stop the damage. Ethan's left arm had been shattered beyond repair during Gralthar's assault, the bones broken and the muscle torn. The medic droids did what they could, but the damage was done. Ethan's heart sank. He had lost a limb. The crowd, still in shock from the brutal attack, watched as Ethan's body was lifted from the arena floor. He was no longer the man who had defied the odds. Now he was a broken hero, a symbol of what it meant to face an opponent with power beyond comprehension. But as the medic droids worked quickly to stabilize him, something strange happened. Gralthar, the blood beast, slowly turned and walked away from the arena's edge. For the first time in the history of the grand tournament, the greatest warrior of them all had shown restraint. He had spared the human. Was it pity, respect, or something deeper? As Ethan's body was whisked away for medical treatment, the crowd fell into a deep silence. This was a moment they would never forget. Ethan had lost a limb, but he had gained something far more valuable, a place in the galaxy's history. And though the match had ended in defeat for the human, the true story was just beginning. The echoes of defeat. Ethan's world was a blur. He had never felt so vulnerable. His entire body ached, but the searing pain in his missing limb was the worst of it. As the medical droids worked to stabilize him, his mind raced. He had come so far, only to lose his arm in the heat of battle. Would the universe's greatest warriors remember him as a hero, or would he just be another casualty, forgotten by time? He had heard the crowd's reaction, the shock, the disbelief, but none of that mattered now. All that mattered was that he had been defeated, not by Gralthar's raw power, but by the one thing that had always set him apart from these legendary warriors, his humanity. The sterile white walls of the medical bay were the last thing Ethan saw as the droids worked their magic, stabilizing his body. The blaring beeping of monitors filled the air, punctuated only by the occasional click or wear of the droid's mechanical limbs. Ethan lay still, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what he had lost. The wound was too severe to save the limb, but at least they were able to save his life. The pain, however, was still very much alive. He tried to move, but his body was too weak. The medic droid monitoring him paused for a moment, analyzing his condition. "You have sustained severe injuries," the droid's mechanical voice spoke, its tone clinical and emotionless. "But your chances of survival are high, human." Ethan clenched his jaw, unwilling to show weakness. He had survived far worse on Earth, and he had pushed himself to the limit to get this far. He wasn't going to let a setback like this stop him. But the truth was, he didn't know what to do now. His arm was gone, and with it, a part of him had been taken. It wasn't just the physical loss, but the emotional one. He had fought to prove himself worthy of standing alongside the greatest heroes of the galaxy, but now he was broken, literally and figuratively. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, memories from Earth flooded his mind. The hardships he had faced, the challenges that had seemed insurmountable at the time, but were nothing compared to this. It wasn't just his body that was broken, it was his spirit. Had it all been for nothing? The sacrifice, the pain, the effort, it all felt meaningless now. But then, something unexpected happened. A voice, low and gravelly, echoed through the room. "You are not done yet, human." Ethan's eyes snapped open, and he blinked against the blurriness, trying to focus. Slowly, a figure came into view, standing in the doorway. It was Gralthar, the blood beast, the one who had delivered the crushing blow that had ended Ethan's fight. The sight of the legendary warrior shocked Ethan. What was Gralthar doing here? Was he here to gloat, to remind him of his defeat? But instead, the blood beast stood silently, watching him with an inscrutable expression. "I didn't expect you to still be breathing," Gralthar said, his voice surprisingly calm. "You've surprised me, human. And that doesn't happen often." Ethan's pulse quickened, and he struggled to sit up, wincing in pain. He had never expected to see Gralthar again, let alone in a place like this. But there was something different about the warrior's presence, something not quite like the arrogance of a conqueror. "What do you want?" Ethan managed to rasp, his throat dry. Gralthar's eyes softened slightly, a strange, almost thoughtful look crossing his face. "I came to speak with you. There is something about you, something different. You have fought against the odds, and you've earned the respect of every warrior in this arena, even me." Ethan scoffed, the bitterness in his voice evident. "Respect? I've lost my arm, Gralthar. I failed. What do I have to prove now?" The blood beast shook his massive head slowly. "You have not failed, human. You may have lost a limb, but you haven't lost the fight. You have shown that even in the face of overwhelming power, you still stand. That is more than most could ever say." Ethan's breath hitched in his chest as Gralthar's words sank in. The pain in his chest was almost as heavy as the weight of the blood beast's praise. Was he right? Was there still a part of him that could stand, even after the crushing defeat? "I came to offer you something," Gralthar continued, his voice quiet but firm. "A chance to regain your strength. You may not be able to fight as you once did, but you still have the heart of a warrior. And I have something that could help you, something that will allow you to keep fighting." Ethan blinked in confusion. What was Gralthar talking about? What could a creature like him possibly offer a broken human? "On my planet, we have a method of restoring lost limbs," Gralthar explained. "It is not easy, nor is it without great cost. But it is possible. If you accept, I can ensure you regain the strength to fight again. But the question is, do you want it?" Ethan's mind raced. The chance to regain what he had lost, the opportunity to continue his fight, to keep proving himself in the galaxy's toughest arena. The temptation was overwhelming, but the cost, what would it cost him? Could he live with the consequences? Gralthar stepped closer, his large form casting a shadow over Ethan's bed. "This is not about glory, human. This is about your will. Will you accept the challenge, or will you stay broken, lost in the past?" Ethan stared up at him, uncertainty clouding his vision. It was a choice he never thought he'd have to make. On Earth, he had always been told that a person was defined by their actions, not their circumstances. Now that same lesson rang in his ears. He had one chance to fight again, to stand tall. But was he ready to pay the price? As he lay there, struggling to form a response, he realized something. This wasn't just about getting his arm back. It was about everything he had fought for. The respect, the strength, the determination. It was all wrapped in this one decision. He could let defeat define him, or he could rise again, even if it meant paying a terrible price. And for the first time since the battle with Gralthar, Ethan felt something stir deep inside him. "I'll do it," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "I'll fight again." Gralthar nodded, a glimmer of respect shining in his eyes. "Very well, human. Prepare yourself. The real battle is just beginning." The price of power. Ethan's mind raced as he lay in the sterile medical bed, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of Gralthar's offer. Could he truly regain what he had lost? The idea of fighting again, of standing alongside the greatest warriors in the galaxy, filled him with an undeniable fire. But the blood beast had spoken of a price, a cost so great that it would change everything about who he was. Gralthar's words echoed in Ethan's mind. The real battle is just beginning. As the medics worked tirelessly to stabilize Ethan's body, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending change. Gralthar had offered him a chance to regain his arm, but at what cost? He didn't know what kind of power the blood beast was talking about, nor what it would do to him. Could he live with the consequences? Could he become something more than just a human? The hum of the medical machines filled the room, but Ethan's thoughts drowned out the noise. He couldn't stop thinking about his decision. Was it worth it? To become more than human? To fight with the galaxy's greatest heroes again? To stand tall in an arena that had already crushed him? He had always been told that strength came from within, that true power was built from the heart and soul. But what if there was another way? What if the key to victory lay in something beyond the physical? Something darker. Ethan could feel the tension in the air. His decision loomed over him like a shadow. After what felt like hours of contemplation, Gralthar's massive form reappeared in the doorway, his presence filling the room. The blood beast's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his gaze. A challenge, perhaps, or maybe even respect. Ethan sat up, wincing at the pain, but he didn't care. His mind was set. He knew what he had to do. "I'm ready," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "What do I have to do?" Gralthar nodded slightly, as if he had been expecting the answer. "You are ready. But understand this, human. The process will not be easy. There will be pain. There will be sacrifice. Your body will change. Your mind will change. But in the end, you will be stronger. Ethan swallowed hard. What kind of change are we talking about? Gralthar's expression darkened. The method I offer is ancient, practiced only by those who have walked the path of true warriors. It requires both physical and spiritual transformation. You will receive a new limb, one stronger and more resilient than the one you lost. But it comes with a cost. Your humanity will be tested. You will not be the same man who entered the arena. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. Was this what he truly wanted? To lose a part of himself in order to gain strength? Was it worth it? The battle for his future wasn't just about the physical, but about who he would become. I understand, Ethan said, his voice tinged with a sense of finality. I'll do whatever it takes. Gralthar gave a single nod, then turned on his heel and left the room, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hall. Ethan was left alone with his thoughts. A strange feeling of anticipation settled in his chest. He was about to cross a line, to step into a realm of power and sacrifice that few had ever known. Later that day, Ethan was escorted to a secluded chamber deep within the arena's medical wing. The walls were made of smooth stone, and a faint blue light pulsed from a set of intricate symbols carved into the floor. The atmosphere was thick with energy, and Ethan could feel a strange hum in the air, something ancient, something powerful. Gralthar stood before a large stone pedestal in the center of the room, and upon it, an intricately designed alien device hummed softly. The device seemed to glow with a strange, unnatural light, and tendrils of energy curled around it like smoke. Gralthar turned to Ethan, his face grave. "This is the ritual that will change you," Gralthar said, his voice low and commanding. "Once you step into the circle, there is no turning back. The pain will be unbearable. The process will strip you of everything you know and rebuild you in ways you cannot imagine." Ethan hesitated, but only for a moment. He had come this far, and he wouldn't back down now. The fear was there, but it was drowned out by the desire to prove himself, to stand tall once more and face whatever the galaxy had to offer. "I'm ready," he said again, his voice steady. Gralthar motioned for him to step into the circle, and as Ethan did, he felt an immediate surge of energy rush through him. The air seemed to hum louder, vibrating with power. The symbols in the floor glowed brighter, and the light from the device became almost blinding. Before he could react, Gralthar activated the device, and a wave of intense energy washed over Ethan. His body convulsed as the energy coursed through him, tearing at his muscles, his bones, and his very soul. Pain unlike anything he had ever known filled every fiber of his being. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the power around him. The process was grueling and relentless. Each passing second felt like an eternity. Ethan's body twisted and contorted as his cells reformed and reshaped, as if his very essence was being molded into something new. He felt his mind unravel, then come back together, stronger and more focused than before. But at the same time, he felt something slipping away, something human. The pain intensified, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might lose himself completely. But just when he thought he couldn't bear it any longer, the energy finally subsided. His breath came in ragged gasps as he collapsed to his knees, his body shaking with exhaustion. Gralthar stepped forward, his face unreadable, but his eyes held a flicker of approval. "You've done it, human. You've completed the transformation." Ethan slowly rose to his feet, feeling the strength in his new limb, a mechanical arm, sleek and powerful. It was a far cry from the human flesh that had once been there, but it was more than enough. He could feel the power coursing through him, and yet there was a hollowness in his chest, as if something essential had been lost in the process. He flexed his new arm, testing its strength. It was more than just functional. It was beyond anything he could have imagined. The raw power it held was incredible, and the feeling of it sent a thrill of excitement through him. But as he looked at it, the truth settled in. This was not just a new arm. This was a new version of himself. A new Ethan, one that had sacrificed a part of his humanity to become stronger. Gralthar studied him for a moment longer before speaking again. "You've chosen the path of power, human. There is no turning back. But remember this, strength is not only about physical might, it is about the choices you make. Now you must decide how you will use this power." Ethan nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. He had crossed the line, and there was no going back. But now he was ready for whatever lay ahead. He was no longer just a human. He was something more, and the galaxy would know his name. The Reckoning. Ethan stood in front of the massive arena gates, the cold metal of his new arm gleaming in the dim light. His breath misted in the air as he flexed his fingers, marveling at the strength and precision it now possessed. The pain from the transformation had subsided, but the weight of what he had sacrificed lingered. He was no longer the same man who had entered this arena. The human weakness that had defined him before had been replaced with a mechanical arm that could crush steel with ease. Gralthar's words rang in his mind. Strength is not only about physical might, it is about the choices you make. Ethan hadn't truly understood what that meant until now. He had thought that by accepting the transformation, he would simply become stronger. But the more he tested his new limb, the more he realized that it wasn't just his arm that had changed. It was his very essence. The power thrummed through his veins, a constant reminder of what he had gained. But with it came a cold, unfeeling presence, an unsettling sense of being removed from the humanity he had once clung to. Was he still the same person? Was he even human anymore? The arena gates creaked open, and Ethan's gaze shifted toward the blinding lights of the Grand Colosseum. The sound of the crowd echoed in the distance, but it felt distant to him. His mind was consumed with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. What kind of warrior was he now? Would the galaxy still see him as a hero, or would he become nothing more than another weapon, created for destruction? The transformation had given him power beyond his wildest imagination. But power came with a price. The voices in his head, the voices of doubt, grew louder. Had he made a mistake? Would he be able to hold on to his soul, or had he already lost it? Gralthar approached him silently, his enormous figure casting a shadow over Ethan's smaller form. The blood beast's face was unreadable, but Ethan could feel the weight of his gaze. "You are ready for the final test," Gralthar said, his voice deep and commanding. "You've proven your strength. Now, you will prove your worth." Ethan nodded, his eyes focused on the arena ahead. The final test. What did that mean? He had faced countless enemies, each stronger than the last. But none of them had ever tested his humanity the way this challenge would. The arena gates swung open fully, and a roar erupted from the crowd. But this time, it was different. The sound didn't fill him with adrenaline as it had before. Instead, it felt hollow, distant, like a world that no longer belonged to him. He stepped forward, each movement sharp and deliberate, the new arm a perfect extension of his will. The weight of the crowd's expectations hung in the air, but he no longer cared. Not in the way he once had. The roar of the audience was nothing compared to the storm that raged inside him. As he entered the arena, he saw the opponent waiting for him, an enormous creature, its massive frame towering over Ethan. The creature was a mix of organic and mechanical, a terrifying hybrid of flesh and steel. It was the ultimate test, a monster created specifically to challenge him, to test his newfound power. Ethan felt a surge of anger rise within him. He hadn't asked for this fight, but it didn't matter. He was a weapon now, and weapons were meant to be used. The creature roared, its metallic claws scraping against the floor as it charged toward him. Time slowed as Ethan's instincts kicked in. His body moved without thought, his mechanical arm rising to meet the creature's incoming strike. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through the arena, rattling the ground beneath them. But Ethan's new arm held firm, his mechanical fingers gripping the creature's claw with an iron grip. The crowd's roar grew louder as the two titans locked in battle. Ethan moved with precision, his new strength allowing him to match the creature's power blow for blow. His arm, though artificial, felt alive with energy, every movement calculated, every strike devastating. He was faster than he had ever been, stronger than he could have imagined. But with each passing moment, Ethan felt something slip further away. The battle was no longer just about defeating his opponent. It was a battle for his very soul. The creature's unrelenting attacks reminded him of the pain he had endured to get here, of the humanity he had lost in exchange for this newfound strength. In the heat of the battle, he could hear the whispers of doubt. Was it worth it? Was this the kind of warrior he wanted to be? He could feel the creature's resistance weakening with each blow, but it no longer mattered. His focus was no longer on victory. It was on the emptiness that grew with every strike. The final blow came in a blur of motion, Ethan's mechanical fist connecting with the creature's head with such force that it crumpled to the ground, lifeless. The crowd erupted into wild cheers, but Ethan didn't hear them. He stood there, panting heavily, staring at the remains of his fallen opponent. A cold chill ran through him as he looked at his own hand, the hand that had struck the fatal blow. The arm was powerful, efficient, and deadly. But in that moment, it felt alien to him. It felt like a weapon, nothing more. Ethan turned away from the wreckage of his opponent, his mind swirling with confusion. He had won the battle. But what had he truly won? The arena had cheered him on, but all he could feel was the emptiness inside him, the hollowness of the power he had gained. He had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. Gralthar approached him, his eyes scanning Ethan's form. "You have done well, human," the blood beast said, a hint of approval in his voice. "But you are not the same as you once were." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "No, I'm not." Gralthar's expression softened, just for a moment. "This is the price of power. It changes you in ways you cannot always control. But remember, you are the one who chooses how to wield it." Ethan didn't respond. He knew the truth of Gralthar's words. The power had come at a cost, and now he had to figure out how to live with it. He had proven his strength, but what kind of warrior would he become? Would he be a hero, or would he be nothing more than a weapon, lost to the very power he had sought to master? The crowd's cheers were still echoing in the distance, but to Ethan, they felt hollow. He had won, but he wasn't sure what he had truly gained. As he left the arena, the weight of his new arm felt heavier than ever. The power was undeniable, but so was the price. He had crossed a line, and the reckoning had only just begun. The awakening. The weight of the arena's victory still hung heavily on Ethan's shoulders as he left the blood-soaked battlefield. His mechanical arm, gleaming under the dim light, felt like a constant reminder of the price he had paid. The cheers from the crowd still rang in his ears, but they felt far away, as though they were echoing from a world that no longer belonged to him. He had proven his strength, but at what cost? He walked silently through the cold stone corridors, his footsteps muffled by the sound of his own thoughts. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the power he had gained was slowly suffocating him. The mechanical arm that had once filled him with pride now seemed like a cold, lifeless thing. It had given him strength, yes, but it had also taken something vital, something he couldn't quite name, but something he felt slipping further away with each passing moment. His mind wandered back to the battle, how easily he had dispatched his opponent. The creature had been powerful, but not enough to match Ethan's new strength, and yet, in the aftermath, all Ethan could feel was emptiness. He had won, but the victory had tasted bitter. Was this what he had truly wanted? A door opened ahead, and Gralthar's imposing figure emerged from the shadows. The blood beast regarded Ethan silently, his gaze unreadable. For a moment, the two warriors simply stood there, the silence thick between them. Finally, Gralthar spoke. "You've done well, human. You have earned the title of warrior, and the respect of many." Ethan didn't reply right away. His thoughts were too clouded, his emotions too tangled. Respect. he asked, his voice rough. "Is that all? What about me? What have I become?" Gralthar's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. "You have become stronger, but that is not always enough. Power does not make a warrior. The heart makes the warrior." Ethan felt a pang in his chest at Gralthar's words. Was that what was missing? His heart. He had thought that power would fill the void, that it would make him whole again. But now, standing before Gralthar, he realized that he had been wrong. The power had only deepened the emptiness inside him. "Tell me," Gralthar continued, his voice softer now. "What is it you seek? Strength? Glory? Or something more?" Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the question sink in. What did he seek? He had fought for so long, seeking revenge, seeking to prove himself. But now that he had the strength to do so, he realized that none of it had brought him peace. None of it had filled the hole in his heart. "I don't know anymore," Ethan admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought power would make me feel complete. But now, I don't even know who I am." Gralthar studied him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. "Power is a tool, not a destination," he said. "It is what you choose to do with it that defines you. But you must learn to listen to your heart, or you will lose more than just your humanity. You will lose everything." Ethan looked up at the blood beast, his heart heavy with the weight of those words. Could it be true? Was there still a chance for him to find what he had lost? Or had he crossed a line from which there was no return? Before he could answer, Gralthar stepped back, his massive form towering over Ethan. "The decision is yours. The path you take will be shaped by your choices, not your strength." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding at last. He had sought strength, but it had led him to a place of darkness, where his humanity felt like a distant memory. He had to make a choice, not just for his future, but for who he truly wanted to be. Would he remain a weapon, defined by the power he had gained? Or would he reclaim his humanity and forge a new path, one where strength was not just physical, but a strength of the heart? As Gralthar turned to leave, Ethan felt a sense of clarity begin to settle over him. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't afraid. He knew what he had to do. Later that night, in the quiet solitude of his quarters, Ethan sat alone, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His mechanical arm glinted in the soft light, and for a long time, he simply stared at it, contemplating everything that had led him to this point. It was a marvel of technology, a masterpiece of engineering. But it was also a symbol of everything he had sacrificed, everything he had become. It had given him power, yes, but it had also taken something from him. Something precious. The man he had been. Ethan's fingers twitched, and for a moment, he wondered if he could ever truly be whole again. The arm was a part of him now, a tool of destruction and strength, but it was also a reminder of the price he had paid. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he didn't want to be defined by it. Not by the power, not by the battles he had fought, not by the victories that had come at such a high cost. He wanted something more. He wanted peace. He wanted to reclaim what had been lost, to rebuild the man he had once been, and to forge a new path. One where strength wasn't just measured by the power of his arm, but by the strength of his heart. And so, with a deep breath, Ethan made his decision. He would use the power he had gained, but he would not let it define him. He would fight, not for glory or for revenge, but for something more important, for redemption. And perhaps, in the process, he would rediscover the humanity that had once made him who he was. With that resolve in his heart, Ethan stood up, his gaze steady and unyielding. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was ready for it, ready to reclaim his heart, ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt hope stir within him. The reckoning had come, and with it, the chance for a new beginning. He would fight for his future, not as a weapon, but as a man.